the night before the TED Talk, they asked me to censor the script and remove like my coming out story, change the pronouns of my ex to girlfriend, and essentially lie about my journey. And I just couldn't do that.
Welcome to the One Day at a Time podcast, where we take things one day at a time. Today in the studio, we have Joshua Simon. Joshua.
It's okay. Like, it's okay. I look, I grew up with people saying Joshua. So
in the studio, we have Joshua Simon.
I'll take whatever iteration.
Can you do a quick introduction for yourself?
Sure. I am Joshua Simon. I just turned 33. I'm a Gemini. All the important information. ENFP.
Very important.
I'm a radio presenter, podcast host. Sometimes I make music, and I am currently cooking a lot.
So you're a
almost chef,
semi-professional cook.
Well, if that is by sort of like watching YouTube videos and then just following their recipes, then yes.
So are you a TikTok chef?
I'm a master chef. No, I've not gone on the TikTok cooking recipes yet because they're so
yet.
Fast. Right, like I need like, even for like an omelette, I need like a 20-minute video. Then I can pause and like slowly watch like TikToks just go way too fast. So yeah.
I see. Okay, I look forward to having your cooking someday. But today, we're gonna have a little chat about, what you're up to these days.
Okay.
And I think many people who, listen to radio like probably have heard your voice before on Kiss 92, where you do a show.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're not really gonna talk too much about that, but we're actually really want to hear more, about your journey to starting your own podcast.
Okay.
Called the SG Boys.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So how what inspired you to start this podcast?
It was well, first of all, I thank you for having me. We've known each other for a while, but like you've always looked the same.
Hey, thank you.
Like I feel like I've known you for like 5, 6, 7 years.
Probably, yeah.
And you're still as youthful as ever. But the thing, I don't know if y'all know this about him, apart from sort of like how exuberant and like full of joy you are, and it's in your music as well. It's there's always been sort of like a very conscious motivation behind your joy, because I have this thing where like I hate like obnoxious happiness, like when people are just happy for the sake of happy, because life is never like that, right? But like you've never come off that way towards me. Like you've always been someone who like you go through a lot, you experience a lot, and you choose joy. And the fact that you're naming sort of the podcast like one day at a time, that's the thing that I always tell people. When I always tell myself, it's like one task at a time, like one, like even the radio show, it's always like 1 hour at a time. Like if I do a 4-hour show, right? So if I can do 1 hour, I can do 2. So I'm always repeating that to myself, especially like, because I do it every day. And there are days where you're just not feeling it, but then you have to be an extrovert, because I'm actually more of an introvert outside of the radio show. Like I do the radio show for 4 hours. The 20 hours after that and before is just like mostly me. And when it's tough to get through those hours, I just like 1 hour at a time, one talk set at a time, one song at a time. As for the podcast, that sort of inception of it, the birth of it was sort of the TED Talk incident controversy thing that happened in 2019. Essentially, I was asked to do a TED Talk. I was very excited to do it because I had spent like a year of magical thinking and grieving, and I had my year of like, I never used to read as much, and now I'm reading everything. I needed any kind of insight to make sense of what I was experiencing in my head, and I was benefiting from a lot of other people's TED Talks. So when you get asked to do the thing that you've been sort of consuming and that's been helping you heal, it was like the greatest. Right. I was so excited. Like I remember like going on Instagram saying like, everyone, I'm gonna get everyone tickets, and like I was going through the scripting process, and because the part that would terrify me about TED Talks, and what also confused me is how they memorized everything, because I'm very bad with lines and memorizing things, and I was trying to like write and then rewrite and then like go through like a memorizing period, and then I had a rehearsal for it, and then the week after, the night before the TED Talk, they asked me to censor the script and remove like my coming out story, change the pronouns of my ex to girlfriend, and essentially lie about my journey, and I just couldn't do that. You know, when you consume all these TED Talks, and it's essentially people being vulnerable on stage, hollowing themselves out in front of like millions of people, you kind of like mentally prepare yourself to do the same, but not to sort of go to what I have been doing on radio. Not to knock radio, but there are things you can say on radio, there are things you can't, and I've learned to accept that, and I've learned to sort of like discern what I can share. I didn't think that the TED Talk X experience was going to be like that. Granted, it's a student-led project, and then that became this big controversial thing about our stories, like queer stories, and where it can be told. And there were a few very kind people that were offering sort of like their stages, like their bars and their clubs, saying like, hey, you can actually do your talk here. But I spent another year closing up, and then the pandemic happened. And then there was that need to not close up further, because everything else around us was closing up. And I thought, okay, everyone's doing a podcast. Like, and that was like, I think 2020 was when like everyone had a podcast, and everyone's like, hey, Josh, you should do a podcast. Cause it's like, yeah, it's like very much in like line with what I do in radio. But the entire time I would think like, whatever I can do on the podcast, I can do on the radio show. So I'm only going to do a podcast if I can do something that I can't do on the radio show. And I was watching a lot of Queer Eye at that point, and I really wished we had a Queer Eye Asia or Queer Eye Singapore, because I think they did one season spin-off. I talk a lot, by the way, so I'm just gonna feel free to jump in and interrupt me and
go for it.
I'm doing my TED Talk here, everyone. So I was watching a lot of Queer Eye, and I wanted a Queer Eye Singapore. And the thing that I always kind of live by is if you want something to happen and it's not happening in the culture, then try to in some way, in your own way, make it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do my own Queer Eye, and I'm going to do it in a podcast format, because there's this sort of intimacy that I've also experienced, and it continues to help me, where you put your headphones on, and regardless of whether you're in a crowded city area or you're by yourself at home or you're in the shower, listening into a conversation, and how that like speaks more than to your mind, but to your spirit, and it changes your demeanor. And I knew that, especially given sort of the subject matter of like LGBTQ stories, having that sense of intimacy and that personal space was very important, because anything sort of printed about the LGBT community in Singapore, even if it's like an Instagram post on like a publication, you just go to the comment section, it's horrible, right? There was recently, just last week, with the whole Taylor Swift fiasco, people trying to get tickets, there was a drag queen performing in a mall in the Philippines, I think in Manila. And I just wrote a comment on one of these major news publications, and Singaporean one. And I just said like, it's admirable to see people gather and enjoy a drag queen in a shopping mall. And there are a lot of incredible queens here in Singapore, and I hope that we support them. Just something as like super simple as that. It just became the top comment with a ton of hate. Everyone just saying like, stop sexualizing children, blah, 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 stop pushing your agenda. Like, it was just nonstop. So I wanted to do a podcast, because also there's no feedback compared to if I were to put it on YouTube. This is a podcast for queer people, but also for anyone to watch. But I'm not looking for anyone's feedback. Like, I'm not looking for anyone's response to people's stories. You can have them and you can DM us separately. But that was why we decided, okay, I'm going to do this podcast. And as for sort of the co-hosts, I wanted to sort of produce my Queer Eye lineup. right? So I had a friend of mine, Semjo, from work, and we weren't like super close friends, but I just could tell that he is this very fun, loud. Now he's a drag queen, by the way. When we first started the show, he was not out of the closet to his family.
Right.
And he's come a long way since. And then we also had Kennedy, who sort of represented the Gen Z generation of activism through Twitter, activism through, you know, like blogs and stuff. And that was very much what Kennedy did. So I thought, okay, let's start a podcast. Yeah.
Wow, what a journey. I mean, it's you know, usually when you ask people, hey, you know, why do you start a show? Why do you start a podcast? It's not that, you know, vulnerable. It's usually something online says, oh, I want to reach out to some people, the correct people and stuff like that. And I wanted to kind of focus a little bit on what you were talking about not looking for feedback.
Yeah.
You know, because in my own journey working in media and marketing, you know, like you for many years, I kind of realized or noticed this pattern, especially with the TikTok style of video consumption, with Reels, Shorts, and TikTok and Snapchat and all that.
Yeah.
I realized that people who have something negative to say tend to, you know, be more they readily say it, right? They and because there's this veil, there's this curtain of, you know, like nobody can really find out who you are. So you know, they say it, and usually the supporters they are more quiet. They you know, quietly share the video. They like the video, but not every supporter with, you know, positive feedback is very upfront or willing to you know, share, because maybe of the fear of being attacked by some of these unnamed, let's just call them haters, right? So with many creators that I'm sure you know and I know, I think sometimes when the topic is slightly sensitive, you know, there can be a lot of negativity, and because the people who are supportive and positive, they don't always comment, because it's not in everybody's nature to do that. You know, they like the video, they like the whatever, they share it, and you know, sometimes you, like you said, you go into the comment section and it just feels like so much negativity that is not warranted, you know. And I really like and respect what you have mentioned about, you know, you just want to do something good, you know, put the stories out there for people who potentially resonate with them, and you're not looking for feedback because you're just doing you just want to have some sort of community where people can feel safe without that fear of being attacked by some of these people who might not be as you know, everybody goes through our thing, so let's just, you know, we don't want to bash these people either, but they are going through their thing. Let's just describe them as people who might not be too woke yet, right? You know, so I really like what you said about, you know, because anybody who runs a channel, run a podcast, you know, like apart from the stories and the content, it's always about engagement, views, you know, subscriber count, all that sort of thing. And similar to you, like at this podcast, you know, like you don't care about that. You just want to, okay, maybe that wasn't the best way to put it, but you really just want to, you know, create a safe space to share stories. Am I wrong to say that?
No, you're not wrong. It's I think a couple of things. The whole wokeness has such a negative connotation today, and you wouldn't say, or you wouldn't place that kind of connotation to it, sort of, I wouldn't go as far as like enlightenment, but more of like just people being more conscious about what they say and do. And that is essentially the heart of being woke, as people call it, and including people rather than excluding people, looking closer. All that is sort of what wokeness is, but wokeness has sort of now been treated as this agenda that people are using, almost like it's marketed that way. And in terms of sort of hate comments and stuff, yes, it's mostly sort of faceless profiles, but they belong to people. Like that's the thing that has always like disturbed my spirit. You know, it's real people every day. They could be actually some of the most pleasant people that are already in your life that have some of these thoughts, but then they just don't know how to sort of articulate it in a way that is accommodating to other people's opinions.
Right.
And the sort of, even with that drag queen comment, it wasn't like how I wrote it was just like, hey, like, let's also try to, like, it would be great if we could also, there are some great drag queens here in Singapore, this is a Singaporean publication, it would be nice for sort of local drag queens to be, shown some love. And that was it. It's like, hey, maybe we can also do that. It's like you don't have to, but it's just like that's just an option.
Right.
But a lot of the comments were from people who are very, very convicted in their truth, and that comes off as hate. It's when people have no room for doubt, no room for an opposing opinion or an alternate opinion. It's just like, this is what this book has told me that life ought to be like, and how people ought to behave, and how we ought to love and treat each other. And I stand by that, and I will be very aggressive with my thoughts, because everyone is just like ignorant or oblivious to my truth. And when you have like 10, 20 people who are not willing to compromise or not willing to have like an alternate opinion come in, it's really hard to even try to talk to them. So that is sort of, I try to remind myself that, people for a long time, especially here in Singapore, were not allowed to speak their mind. And if you look at, what I love doing is trying to look at sort of culture and what informs behavior. And for a long period of time before the internet came about, Singaporeans were in school told to sit up straight, deliver the grades, not talk or ask questions to your teachers or your friends. And because of how tight that pressure cooker was, that leaves all these sort of recreation and stuff on the outside be a mess. And then like you don't know how to behave. You don't know how to like debate objectively, constructively, how to have another opinion and then also welcome another opinion and be okay with being wrong. We don't know how to do that because we are drilled and sort of conditioned to always try to get the right answer. So once you found the right answer, you wear it like a badge, like a scout's badge.
Right.
And then the internet comes about and it gives you a chance to create like another account and for you to vent. I've met some of these sort of haters and they often don't mean any harm, or they don't realize what they're saying, or they're just so convicted in their truth. And they are, so it's, I knew, at least for our podcast, sort of going back to that I didn't want to have this mess be what our audience has to go through, because they're already going through it as it is,
Exactly.
And I wanted the podcast to also, even within the community, for the LGBT community, like we named it the SG Boys, and that was a very deliberate decision because SG Boy was, and it still kind of is, like a little wink that queer people used to tell each other that I'm gay. Like if you sort of look at the hashtag SG Boy on Instagram or Twitter, you get a lot of queer content, but you also get a lot of sort of thirst traps, a type of skin type, a type of body type. And I thought it would be quite funny to turn it around and be like, instead of visual representation of what a Singapore boy is, now you get like an audio one, and it's a lot more wholesome. And I was very careful about the sort of the marketing of it, because any kind of queer nightlife event or movie or TV show, they were for a period of time using a lot of that, like using skin to attract its own audience. And I want it not to knock that, but sort of like to have another a variation of it, where this one is not about that. This is different skin colors, different body types. It's we only talk about sex, even as a gay podcast, we only talk about sex in like season 3, because that only felt like a natural sort of segue into it, because there's so many other pressing things that we wanted to talk about before we even got to that. And the feedback that we did get from our audience was that they liked that it was feedbackless.
Mm.
That they like that they could listen at their own time, and it's not about views, it's not about how many listens, because we get like, we'll put an episode out and then a couple of hundred people listen to it, and then we don't touch it, and we do other episodes and we go on, and then we come back to it, and this one will have like 30, like tens of thousands of views, and it will be from different parts of the world. You get like Singaporeans listening from the Philippines, you know, from Argentina, like really random places, and it's nice, you know. It's something that I've not experienced in radio, where people are like intentionally, consciously listening to your conversation, because radio is so much like peripheral listening, where people like put it in the background. You can have like the most incredible conversation with God,
right,
and people will not even notice, because it's, you know, it's just playing in 7-Eleven, you know, but the numbers are a lot. But then here on our podcast, our numbers may not be huge, but like it means something to people,
right.
So yeah.
Man, I didn't intend for the topic of the podcast to go this way, but I'm really, really glad that it did, because I personally I was also struggling a little bit with, you know, what you're talking about, this whole feedback thing, and you know, engagement, and also like the people who kind of provide the people who kind of comment, you know, with these things. Like sometimes they just don't know any better, and sometimes they just, you know, are so convicted in their own truth, like you're talking about. But it could really cause some real damage to people on the other side. And you know, for someone like me, and you for that matter, you know, we've been living and breathing media and stuff for a while. So if things like hate or whatever is directed at us, I think we have grown resilient, or learned how to deal with it to some degree, right? Sometimes it does get to us, you know, but like we have learned how to deal with it. But I was struggling a lot when I put out this episode where I interviewed, like on this podcast, where I interviewed this young lady who was an adventurer. She traveled the world alone as cheaply as possible, going to places like Kazakhstan or something like that, and she was like being vulnerable, sharing a story about how she was seeking adventure but instead got molested, you know, in a car, and she broke down and she was crying, and I thought that story was really powerful. And but in the comment section, people were basically victim blaming, saying that, you know, it's your own fault for going to such a dangerous place alone, and basically saying just calling her, you know, things that made me feel very uncomfortable. And I didn't know how to deal with it, because now the hate wasn't directed at me, not really, you know, but it was directed at this other person on my platform, and I sort of enabled that, and I didn't really know how to deal with it, because, you know, us people who have been in the media for a while, maybe we find a system, a way to deal with it. But normal people just trying to live the best life, you know, they might not have gone through that thing, and I was struggling a little bit with, you know, like, man, am I doing something wrong, or am I doing something right, providing this platform where people can be vulnerable, but instead sometimes when sensitive topics are brought up, they are attacked instead of supported, which is not my intention at all. So I was struggling a little bit with that, and whatever, you know, you said, I think, I don't know, maybe the universe, you know, brought us together to talk about this instead of you being gay and stuff, you know, and I really, really like what you said about how, you know, sometimes being in the media and doing marketing for so long, we just have this muscle reflex of, looking at engagement, looking at numbers and stuff like that we sometimes I lose sight, or I forget why I'm even doing this in the first place. And sometimes maybe what we should do as facilitators, or people with you know, people who have a platform, is to do what you're saying, is that sometimes maybe not having feedback and just putting stuff out there into the universe, and just having faith that the universe will deliver it to the people who need to hear them. Maybe that's all we need to do.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that experience. You know, it's like you're in school, right? And you're like just doodling something, because I used to do that. I used to like always like, I'll get like a jotter book, like exercise book, and just like doodle random things, you know, and then like someone would just like walk past and just like make a comment, you know, and then you're hurt by it, you know. And then someone walks past and your teacher says like, that's a really good drawing, and like you have a lot of potential to like do this in the future, and then you're completely swept away by it, you know. They're not that different, both like the student that walked past and the teacher that like praised you. But what was the most important was that you were doodling, right? And now we're getting like 100 teachers walking past saying that what your story is beautiful, and we get like 100 people walking past saying they're blaming you, or they're making fun of you, or they're talking about something else that's like totally random, like you're fat. And it's like, but you're not even looking at my drawing, you know. So like and then it's very easy to get swept away by it. And the thing that I'm trying to always do now is, and encourage people to do as well, is just to remember the fact that you're just doodling and you're enjoying doodling, and it's a joy to doodle. And the doodle that you've just drawn means something to you, and only you will get it, and no one else has to interpret it. People can adore it and they can hate it, but it doesn't take away from your action itself, and you are benefiting from the experience of doodling. Right now, everyone's got an opinion, and it's near impossible to change people's minds. You can find people that agree with you, and very quickly you'll find someone that disagrees with you. And sometimes you have to try to look at this entire behavior with a sense of humor. And when it comes to sort of views, everyone is famous now. You know, everyone is famous now. Like before, we used to sort of you sort of have to convince your gatekeeper to let you in, you know, whether you're auditioning for a role or something, to have them say like, oh yeah, you got the job because you have the skill set.
Right.
Now it's like everyone can find their niche and find their spot to become famous. And that is where the culture is, and that is where technology is bringing us. When TikTok came out, a whole bunch of very ordinary people became very extraordinarily famous.
Right.
And with every new app that comes out, there will be that phenomena over and over and over again. So the sooner we kind of see through that, the sooner we stay sane through this entire thing, because everyone is going to be famous. And when everyone is famous, like it's like everyone being rich, you know, like what is rich anymore? Like what is fame anymore? Like really, what is fame? It doesn't make sense anymore. The allure loses itself. Like the allure goes away. The numbers don't matter anymore. And I've sort of reached that point where when people are like, hey, you should go on TikTok, you should do this, you can go viral. It's like, but I have gone viral. Like I've done stuff that got like tens of millions of views.
Right.
And I was the same person, and I still went through a lot of shit, and it didn't change my outlook in life. It didn't change a lot of things in my life. And I've done stuff that I'm very proud of that no one noticed. And it made me like question whether I should keep doing that. So like always go back to the doodle, always go back to the fact that you're still drawing, you know. The biggest takeaway that I've ever gotten from interviewing these mega stars, and I've interviewed like some of the biggest names, the most powerful people in the world, like from Britney Spears to Hugh Jackman, blah, blah, blah. Yep. Like the thing that when people are moved by my interviews, or they say like, hey, these are really good interviews, the reason why I say they are really good interviews is because it's got less to do with me and more to do with the person I'm interviewing, hearing what they're actually saying. Like I like asking questions to people so that they can have a conversation with me, which will give them insight on what they're going through in life. So like I'm asking you questions that'll make you reflect, and then make you go, oh yeah, that is what I'm feeling. That is my opinion about things. Interesting. Should I question it? Should I change my opinion? Like, am I still not there yet? Like, and I like seeing that in who I interview. And I say all this to sort of go to my point, which is you doing this podcast and having her on, for example, just her sharing her story meant more than anything. Like she needed to share her story. Similarly, so for every guest that I've had on my show, they have not had their stories told. whether it's on a mega platform on like the newspapers or on a TED Talk stage or as an Instagram post. Like they have not reached that point where they are able to do that. So we create that place where they can just talk and just say, this is what I went through in my army life, and hear from other people, and feel that sense of release. Like, oh, okay, it's out there, you know, and that means something to each of the guests that we've had on. And for ourselves as sort of hosts of the show, because there are a lot of episodes where we start digging through our own stories and we start reflecting, and it's almost like a time capsule for us. Like I'll listen to some of the early episodes of the SG Boys. I'm like, oh gosh, I was so sad. You know, I can hear the sadness in my voice of what I was going through when I recorded that episode. And it was important for me that there was that cathartic release. And it was also important for me to have that bank of experiences so that I can pick back in the future and look back at sort of the catalog of everything and be like, okay, this is us. Like this is our community. As of recorded from 2020 till 2023, like this is where each of these individuals were in their lives and what their thoughts were. And it may change, you know. The process is more important than the product. Yeah.
Man, this just became like a therapy session for me. And I thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's rare to get perspectives like that, and maybe it's also because you have gone through your fair share of shit, like you mentioned, and I think that's a very powerful perspective. And you know, okay, let's go back into talking about like, you know, your podcast and stuff. And
sure.
But thank you so much for that.
I didn't prep any of this. You know what I mean? Like it's
Neither did I.
No, but that's the joy of it, right? That's the joy of this. Like I'm not saying this because I rehearsed this or this is what I 100% stood by. You know, it was just I'm reacting to what you're saying and I'm reflecting at the same time, and I'm asking myself, is this true? Do I truly believe in this? You know, so it's happening real time, which is the joy of the platform, is the joy of what we're doing.
Absolutely. You know, right? I have a list of questions prepared, and I've only asked one, and the rest of it seems pretty irrelevant now.
Oh, no, go ahead. What's my favorite bubble tea?
No. You know, no one cares about your favorite bubble tea.
Because I don't like bubble tea. Good.
Okay.
I don't get bubble tea.
But, I think I also want to ask you, because you are evidently someone who thinks pretty deeply about just things that happen to you in general. You reflect a lot based on the way that you're speaking and what you're saying. It comes across as you're someone that reflects quite a bit, right? And I wanted to kind of also know, I mean, I've known you for a while, but you know, we don't really talk about these things also, but I wanted to kind of bring up the topic of your journey to coming out, and because you weren't always so open about it, right? And also how you kind of found peace in that, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know if you found peace. It feels like you have.
Yeah, I certainly have.
And also, okay, this is a very long and multi-part question, but I'm sure you have a story to tell for sure. So like how you kind of embraced the person that you are, and maybe, you know, the journey to getting there, the stories will help somebody who might chance upon this episode, you know, based on your stories. For
sure.
You know, anybody is not just our LGBTQ plus friends, but also anybody who is sort of abnormal in a sense where, you know, we don't fit into the mold of what it traditionally means to be normal.
Yeah, feeling like the other. Going from pressure to peace to pride. I mean, I was always out without being out, without intentionally being out. Just from sort of choices and my behavior, I would choose like Kitana over Scorpion. I would choose Chun-Li over Ryu. You know, Tomb Raider versus like Indiana Jones. You know, so I was always for the Disney princess rather than sort of like whoever the prince is, Eric.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was that. It was choosing choir and dance over basketball and soccer. It was choosing to exclaim when everyone wanted to be cool and like muted and serious and low. I went high, like I would go for falsetto when everyone wanted to break their voice as soon as possible, so that was always immediately deemed as gay or bapo or whatever, or those terms that people used.
Right.
And I never associated it with sexuality at that point because I didn't know what my sexuality was. Like I liked girls. I was waiting to like girls because I thought that's what everyone is supposed to do. And when what felt natural to me became immediately met with, oh, this is a sin, and like everyone has to like put their hands on me and pray for me.
Right.
Because I came from a very, very strict like religious Christian background. My dad's a reverend, now pastor of a Bible Presbyterian church, where it's like very much heavy on the Old Testament,
Right.
10 Commandments, more so than grace on the New Testament. So I didn't fight it first. I think I used it because something incredible happened in the mid 2000s, and that is Lady Gaga. And when Lady Gaga released Born This Way and Glee had Kurt Hummel, there was this incredible rise in sort of pop culture figures holding the pride flag, or at least even just holding the fact that you are who you are and you should embrace it. And at that age of sort of being a teenager, young adult, you also kind of wanted to rebel. So being gay was my dyeing my hair phase, where I was just like, oh, this is the cool thing to do, without really like understanding it, without really understanding what my sexuality is, how I feel, what kind of lover am I, what am I looking for, how do I view sort of sex, for example. Everything was sort of in this period of like rebel against society, rebel against the man, the construct and everything. So I was how I was, I thought I liked a type of guy. I thought I didn't like a type of guy. I thought I was this about myself. I thought I had to change myself, so that was sort of that mess of coming of age that I think a lot of us go through, regardless of whether it's sexuality or something else, right? And it wasn't until much later, actually, it wasn't until like 27, 28, where I had pumped in years in my career. I was ready to like fall in love. And I did. And I felt like that whirlwind romance that like swept me off my feet. I was ready to let everything go. Where my whole life was just like career was the most important thing in my life. Like radio is the most important thing. I was interviewing celebrity after celebrity. I was just like, I need to have this. I want to be known as the guy who's interviewed every major celebrity in the world. But I was ready to let everything go for this one guy. And then when it ended, it shattered me, like completely shattered me, which is what led to that year of magical thinking and year of grief and year of whatever. And during that period, I felt like I had matured and come into my sexuality to a point where I didn't consciously decide I'm going to be an activist, or like consciously decide like I'm going to come out. Like I was not, for people around me that knew that I was dating a boy or whatever, I was out to them because people were calling me gay before I could even sort of claim that. But for my parents, I was not out to them until the day of my breakup, which was quite bizarre. That the day of my breakup, so what happened was my dad was sitting on my bed at like 5 a.m, which is very strange. Like my dad and I don't have like the best relationship. Now we kind of do, but he was sitting on my bed and he said like, let's go for lunch, which is another thing that we never do. So what happened was my dad was running to be the head pastor of the church. And then I was with my mom and my dad and we were having brunch and he said that there was a churchgoer who had seen one of my videos out there where like I'm also open about myself online, but it's always like you're open online, but no, my parents don't watch that kind of stuff. So I don't think they would know. Right. So they watched one of those videos and then they wrote a letter confirming that like Simon's son is gay, so he's not fit to run the church. No. And he sent it to my dad and to all his colleagues, like all the elders, to get my dad to not run. So then it was okay, now you're fucking with my family. And then also like, oh yeah, now my dad knows I'm gay and my mom. And that's two very like different people, and their parenting styles are so different as well. Their character is so different as well. And my dad was not angry. He was just very confused and lost because he was also dealing with that. He like at that moment was dealing with like his whole life was his church. Like my dad came from like a really, really rough background, and church was the only thing he had. So now that is sort of getting shattered. And then there is sort of what the letter was saying, which is like, oh, his own family is in shambles. He can't run a church. So now he's like, oh, is that true? Like, and I had to, at that point, also empathize with my dad that when you come out, very often as queer people, not just with your sexuality or identity, or even if you want to do drag, you know, like anything in this that we've not been learning a lot about for so much of our lives, you have to now educate people with what you're coming out with, you know. It's not far off from telling someone that you have like a medical condition, and then you have to explain to them what the condition is, and then tell them like also like the diagnoses and like what are the remedies and what I'm doing, as if this has anything to do with the other person, you know. And you have to tell them not to worry, you know. That's all these different things. And it's the same thing for being gay. It's like, I'm gay, and then my mom would be thinking like, is he gonna cross-dress? Is he telling me that he is HIV positive? Is he telling me that he is trans? Like, they don't know. So I left the educating thing till later. But I remember feeling very, very strong. And my feet was very firmly planted on the ground and I told my dad this, and I said, like, it's such a sad thing that the day you find out that I'm gay is the day that like I've lost this guy that I wanted to introduce you to. Like, I would have really wanted my coming out to be like, hey, a positive thing where like, hey, I'm in love with someone, but now it's like you're capturing me at a point where I'm shattered and you're shattered. And then now we have to try to understand what the shards are, you know? So that was my coming out experience. And that was also, sort of the catalyst for me creating the podcast a year later, and why I got that TED Talk thing was because I was like, okay, great. Now everyone knows. Okay, now everyone knows. I'm just going to be completely myself, and I'm just going to like exist, and I'm going to be. And when the silver lining, I guess, of not doing the TED Talk and it also then being a controversial thing, and it was then printed on the newspaper that this gay radio DJ was supposed to do a TED Talk, and then now he's not allowed to do it. And so now I'm out on a public, like, national scale, which also affects my dad, you know, because when all those articles were coming out about the TED Talk thing, my dad was getting the same article, so was his colleagues. And I don't know how much you know about like church people, but they gossip a lot. Like, my friend Sana is like that. So they were going through that tenfold. And at work, it was like that as well. At work, it was like, everyone knows I'm gay. Everyone can tell I'm gay, or they just prescribe me gay or whatever. But now it's like, now it's known that Josh is a gay radio DJ. And now like the lines of what I can and cannot say needs to be like really like, now there's a mark on my back. You know, now it's like, now that everyone knows he's gay, we're not going to fire him for sure, but like, you need to be like extra careful that you know the IMDA rules and regulations of what you can and cannot say. So I'm very, very extra careful. So all that kind of led to where I am now. But I will say that I'm glad it happened at that point, because I was not running from it. I was really not running from it, because it was years and years and years of sort of like dating around and then like falling in love and falling out of it and all that. Like it was at a point where now I know what I'm fighting for. Now I'm very, very like, I'm very, very firm about my pride. And I don't have to wear anything rainbow to tell you that I'm very proud of myself, and I'm very proud of my sexuality, and I'm very proud of my community. And it is because we should have the same rights to hold whoever's hand we want to, like the same way, like any, like, I don't know why straight people like to like make out on escalators, but like that is such a scary thing for me and a guy that I'm dating, even till now, because there's still that level of shame that we have yet to eradicate. But push comes to shove, I will fight for it, because it's like, it's my right to love. It's like, love is like we can all agree, love is like the most beautiful thing you can ever experience in this life, whether it's love for a dog or love for your job or love for your family or your partner, And the fact that I've been taught to view my love as something as shameful or sinful or something vulgar or something that is disgusting, and that's something I should like immediately correct and then rehabilitate and then steer and change my complete like self and how I think and how I feel, is baffling. Like, it's baffling. And the fact that it has been done throughout history through various cultures and my people have been like persecuted and treated as such is disgusting, so like it's so disgusting, and it doesn't take away from anything like that you have, it doesn't. It's just a reminder that like I exist and I behave the same way you behave, and I have the right to also then figure my shit out,
Right.
So yeah,
Man, it's a real journey, right?
Yeah.
For you. I mean, so you have gone through your own fair share of, like just pondering and working this thing out over the course of what may be your entire life. How about, I do know people in my life that I am very close to that are, are still figuring this thing out, right? Being gay, coming out, and I and some of these people who are very, very close to me, I see them really, really struggling with, their identity. And, like what you said just now, that love is one of the most powerful things that we can experience. But because of how powerful it is, it can also be a double-edged sword. Like, just an example. I'm sure many people go through this, but just as an example, someone like you or like a close friend of mine who comes from a very, very pious Christian family or religious background, no matter what the religion is, right? People who are very pious tend to be slightly, they're very convicted to their belief systems and their faith. And it's slightly harder for them to accept certain things that is outside of what the rules are, like the 10 Commandments or whatever.
Yeah.
And sometimes because of that, it's like there's a lot of fighting and maybe sometimes even violence, and it's not because I hate you like the usual trolls online that don't know better, but it's because I love you and I believe that you're going down the wrong path because in my belief system and yours just don't gel. And, and it's because of love that I'm scolding you, I'm beating you up, I'm chasing you out of my house, hoping that you will see that you're going down the wrong path or whatever. And that really makes me feel very, very, very sad because now there's two people, maybe a parent or the kid or whoever, right, who love each other so much, but because of the different, they're just trying to be themselves and what they stand for, what they believe in, and they just can't find common ground. And because they love each other so much, both of them are so broken. You don't know to just step forward and believe and go for your truth, or live a life of like just hiding, just to kind of continue to have somewhat of a relationship with someone that you love, brought you up, made you the person that you were, type of thing.
Yeah.
Based on your own experience, what would you say to somebody like that, which I believe are, everywhere in the world? They are going through this struggle, not because of anything like hate or whatever, but because of love. They're struggling.
I think like the thing that I think people would expect me to say is like like follow like your heart and your truth and everything. But like, and that may be true, and that there is certainly that as well. But so the thing that I also try to do as someone who is in some way an activist as well is I watch a lot of right-wing content, and I watch a lot of constructive debates from people that don't view my life the way they view my people, you know? And with that comes all these little dilemmas and reflections that I then have with myself. Like, what would I say to that queer person who is going through this dilemma as well? I mean, no one chooses that dysmorphia or dissonance that they experience with their identity, with their sexuality, with any aspect of that, like their race, their skin color, their body type. No one chooses that. None of us has had the privilege of looking at our life before it begins and go and choose exactly what attributes we want, physical, personality and everything. None of us have had that. All of us have just been here. We're raised a certain way. The culture around us is a certain way. We're taught certain things. We abandon certain things. We live by certain things. And that shapes who we are. And there are also things that happen to us that we don't choose. And they come to our attention and we have to deal with it. And because we don't know how to deal with it, we don't have time to deal with it, we don't have the grace to live with what feels natural and experience, we have a lot of outside interference. Everyone telling you this is what you ought to do. You got to take this pill. You got to go for this session. You got to go for this thing. So it's very easy to get lost in everything. So I would honestly tell that person to give yourself some time and ask if other people can give you some time to just live and exist and make your own choices. I'm not someone who now, like if you asked me before doing this podcast, I would have been like, everyone has to come out of the closet. Everyone has to just embrace your sexuality. Everyone has to just, from where I am right now as of sort of this recording, I don't think anyone has to do anything if they don't want to do it. If you don't want to come out of the closet, or if you want to deny your sexuality, or if you want to deny your identity, if that is how you choose to live your life, you should be given the freedom to make that decision by yourself without having anyone make that for you or influence that. That is the best thing I can offer people, which is what we should be offering each other, which is to make your own choices, make your own decisions, whether it's living by what feels right to me or denying it for the rest of my life. Anyone should be able to make that decision. And I would ask sort of them to sort of communicate with the people around them as well, that that's what they need. Yeah, because there are a lot of, I think the other perception that I think is also very false is that the moment you come out of the closet or you embrace yourself and go into the LGBTQ community, you're going to be immediately embraced, and it's going to be rainbows and glitter and sparkles, and everything is like you immediately find your chosen family and everyone's going to treat you wonderfully. It's not true. You go in there like any group of people, you have a lot of hurt people that are still trying to figure out how they are, who they are, where they fit. And I've heard so many stories from people who've went through a lot and decided to come out of the closet only to go through hell being in the LGBT community and not being able to find their tribe and not being able to find acceptance and embracing who they are and then feeling ugly after embracing who they are. So it's not a one decision that will like completely change the rest of your life and set everything in place. It is not. And there are also a lot of people who end up losing their family, and if they have chosen to put their family above themselves, that is also their decision and their right to make that call as well. So yeah, I just want people to live and allow themselves some grace to live and experience and fall in love and fall out of love and date and not date or make mistakes and then like reevaluate and then have constant conversations and reflections and fine, get feedback from people, get opinions and insight from people, but you don't have to immediately wear it and take it as your gospel truth, you know? Like I think I have enough faith that eventually people will find their way if they are able to look at what's around them objectively and then decide for themselves. Yeah.
Which is often the toughest part, right? Because when you're going through all these emotions, sometimes it's a little bit harder to view things objectively.
Yeah.
Right. But like you said, it's a journey, and it's about figuring things out as you can when you can. There's no like you said, there's no need to wear anything like a badge. There's no need to embrace anything immediately before you can sort your thoughts out, figure out what the shards even are.
Yeah.
Like you're sharing just now. Thank you so much for this. And that was therapy with Joshua Simon. I mean, this is very 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 nice and very therapeutic even for me. And I cannot claim to know what you go through or anybody else, because we are all our own person. But whether it's being gay or choosing to be different, like a different type of career, choosing to act differently, just and stuff like that. I think what you have said is very, very applicable to people who are different, whether you're gay or not. Like sometimes I see people going through really, really bad struggles because they chose a certain career, like being an actor or music or whatever, which is not conventionally the correct thing to do, and they struggle so much, so it's or people who choose to go into something because they have so much passion for it, say maybe community work, which we all know don't pay very well compared to some other industries, but just choose to do it, and people around them just don't agree with them, don't see eye to eye with them. And everything that you have shared, I think is very personally, I think it's very applicable to many people, including myself. People who choose to, well, not always choose, people who are just slightly different from what the societal conventions of what being normal is. And I hope this message that you're saying, this story that you're sharing, reaches the correct people who might be struggling or figuring things out, and that hopefully provides them with some perspective to be maybe slightly more objective about what these items or these shards in their life are and how they could potentially navigate life.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming down and spending time with me, Josh. I really appreciate that. And if there's anyone, I'm sure you are open to it as well. If there's anyone who is watching or listening to this podcast who would like to kind of reach out to you to share their story, or to just have a conversation with you, because you are sort of someone with a little bit of experience of going through certain things, where can they find you online?
Well, I'm not gonna. Well, I know I'm supposed to say like I'm on Instagram and but like I do get people who message me, and it's not easy. It really is not, and it's something that like I think it started off really cute when I started the podcast, but then like when you go and have these conversations and episodes, and people have those conversations with themselves, and they reflect and they share their stories. It's really like the nuances of what people experience can be really overwhelming. Really, really overwhelming. I think I like texted you about this. Like someone messaged me about like they just declared themselves as gay for their army checkup. And they were very proud of themselves, and I was obviously proud of them as well, but I was also immediately hit with concern. Like I was just like, I actually don't know what's going to happen to you. I know rumors of what people tell me it will be like for you, but I don't actually have any concrete information or any updates from when I was in army, like 10 years ago. So now I need to go and find that information out, and I hope they go and find that information out as well. So like I'm not running a clinic. you know?
Yes, you're not.
As much as I want to, as much as I hope that each of us can be little clinics and lighthouses to each other's.
Right.
But yeah, I like, you know, as you're saying that, I get random thoughts that come to my mind. I was sort of reflecting on what you had talked about earlier about like the numbers and the views and Instagram and social media and everything. And it's like, it's so I went to film school, right? And the thing that I've always learned on what makes a good story is conflict, right? And we're getting like constant conflict in our lives, on every level, environmentally, politically. It's just conflict, and we're choosing conflict and we're seeking out conflict for enjoyment. Our entertainment that we consume is grounded on conflict, and it's Greek tragedy rules, you know. And we can't run from conflict, you know. But there are also a lot of other things that happen in the face of conflict. You know, there's a lot of resolution, there's peace, as you said, you know, not escalating that conflict and not giving power to that conflict. And I want us to try to focus on all the other things except like the conflict, because there's enough of that. I feel that we feel towards ourselves, conflict within ourselves, conflict against like our family and sorry, I don't have like an actual thing that I'm bringing that to, but that was just as you were talking, that was what was coming to me.
Right.
But yeah, I'm on Instagram at Joshua Simon XL.
Thank you so much. I mean, I agree. You're absolutely right. Like you or anybody who runs a platform, you're not running a therapy service. Basically, you're not running a clinic, and sometimes the weight of feeling like maybe you have the responsibility every time you say something to somebody might be a little bit too much, especially when the volume gets too much.
Yeah.
Because even for you, you are learning every day, you're growing and you're processing your thoughts every single day, and you don't see yourself, and you definitely are not an authority figure on choosing to be you or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not turning people away. I'm not saying like, don't message me, don't tell me your story, I'm not interested. Like that would be ironic that I'm running a podcast where I share people's stories and I don't have you on.
Right.
No, it's just more of like, find me because you want to connect with me.
Right.
Find me because you want to connect with me, because you want to be my friend. You want us to hang out, or you want us to like have a conversation, or you want to be on the show. That's like fine. But like, don't come to me if you think I'm going to heal you or give you the truth or whatever. Like I don't think you should go looking to people like that for that as well, because like I really don't know the truth. I don't know, like in the case of the army thing, I really don't know. Like I'm glad that I could play a role of just being a brother to that person and sharing what they've gone through and they needed to share.
Yep.
And I'm glad they could share that to me.
Yep.
But I want to help, and I don't know how to help at this moment, you know? So as long as people are aware that I'm not a pharmacy, you know?
Yeah.
But like I'm here to sit with. I'm the person on the bench that you can sit with and tell me your things, and I'll tell you my things, you know, if I can and if you can as well. Yeah.
That's awesome, Josh. Thank you so much. And I hope that whatever you have shared, you know, is provides a little bit of a perspective for many of these people who are struggling with their identity, whatever that means. Thank you, and thank you so much for watching One Day at a Time, and we'll see you next time. Peace.